Amityville. Not sure about you. Nothing?
I really like the one.
Yes, Alice.
The father of the bride house. Yeah.
It's a very popular house.
The house from Home Alone.
Home Alone house. That's another very popular house. Blade Runner. Wow. Brady Bunch. Why is that your favorite house?
I like the mid-century Musicbed.
Interesting. I didn't expect to hear that as a favorite. It's on the list, but I wouldn't think it's a favorite. Any movies besides Amityville? What's that? Practical Magic House.
Practical Magic.
Sandra Bullock is a witch. Women. This was in the 90s.
So Sandra Bullock's daughter is my wife in that movie.
Sandra plays. Like, really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. She's a child actress.
Wow. It's very cool. What year did that movie come out?
96 or 97.
Yeah, early 90s.
It's based on a book by Alice Hoffman.
Yeah.
Big fan.
I can't tell. Are we ready? Okay. Okay, guys. Welcome to Buildings and Brews. Thank you guys for coming again. We took the summer off. We're going to start kind of lighthearted today. We're just going to have fun. We're going to look at architecture in Hollywood, the story our houses tell. It really is important what we're talking about. It really does matter. And you'll see why. But houses are characters. Are you going to do that the whole time? No, just that was it? Okay. Because that would have distracted me.
Sorry.
But houses are characters, okay? Houses, it's something I've learned. I've read a bunch of books, and I realized later I read the wrong ones. But there's a bunch on Hollywood, MGM style, screen deco, screen style of the 40s. This is probably the best one, architecture and film. Some really good articles in there. Most of those steer towards the golden era of Hollywood, and I think we're more interested in the later stuff, but we'll see. I want to thank my sponsors, Kuchen Brothers, Windsor One, and now Rockwool is now a sponsor. So I want to thank them for paying for your beer and the sandwiches and stuff. So thank you to our sponsors. The architecture in Hollywood. We're going to talk about kind of the magic of Hollywood. And I say that in that houses do enchant us, right? You guys started naming off some houses that you really love. And there, TVs and movies do suck us in, and we kind of begin to relate. We begin to feel like we know the Brady Bunch people. We know Leave It to Beaver. We recognize the house. And so architecture becomes a defining character. And so that's important because as we build our houses and work on our houses and create stories about our houses, we can learn from Hollywood. We're going to talk about the backlots and the houses that they built, the western towns and things like that. Houses from our favorite movies. We're going to have some quiz later, see who wins, and then, of course, why it matters and what it says about us. I want to start with Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House. Who's seen this movie? 3 people. Okay. The rest of you need to leave. This is a great story. This is the movie that The Money Pit was based on. Okay. So Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House is written by a guy, Eric Hodgson, I think, and it's a true story. He basically built this house, ran out of money, had to sell the house, and then wrote this book. It became a bestseller, and it became this movie with Cary Grant. Basically, it captures, if you remember, Levittown and what happened, why Levittown became such a big deal, is that after World War II, there was major housing problems as far as overcrowding, and people were leaving the city, going out to the suburbs. And this is kind of chronicles that. This is done in 1948. They live in a New York apartment. It's very crowded. it's very uncomfortable. His wife says, let's do this remodel and blow out this wall. He says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go buy a house in the country. He kind of gets swindled into buying this early colonial house that gets declared, unsafe. They have to tear it down. And there's just all these disasters that go along with their journey, and it's very funny and very interesting. I'm going to show you some clips here of this, and my PowerPoint on my iPad doesn't work, so I got to flip back and forth. But there's a number of scenes here I'm going to show you. One is this wife talking about picking out paint colors, and then the other one is about the homeowner walking through the job and talking to the subs. This is the paint color. Contractor.
Now first the living.
Paint contractor.
Soft green. Not as blue green as a robin, say.
No.
But not as yellow green as daffodil buds. Now the only sample I could get is a little too yellow. But don't let whoever does it go to the other extreme and get it too blue.
No.
It should just be a sort of grayish yellow green. Now, the dining room, I'd like yellow. Not just yellow, a very gay yellow. Something bright and sunshiny. I tell you, Mr. Padelford, if you'll send one of your workmen to the grocer for a pound of their best butter and match that exactly, you can't go wrong. Now, this is the paper we're going to use in the hall. It's flowered, but I don't want the ceiling to match any of the colors of the flowers.
No.
There's some little dots in the background. And it's these dots I want you to match. Not the little greenish dot near the hollyhock,
No.
but the little bluish dot between the rosebud and the delphinium blossom. Is that clear? Now the kitchen is to be white. Not a cold antiseptic hospital white.
No.
A little warmer, but still not to suggest any other color but white. Now the powder room, in here, I want you to match this thread, and don't lose it. It's the only spool I have, and I had an awful time finding it. As you can see, it's practically an apple red, somewhere between a healthy wine staff and an unripe jar. Excuse me.
You got that, Charlie? Red, green, blue, yellow, and white.
That's one. Good one, right? Then the other one. So this is the next one.
Hey, mister, you're the owner here, aren't you? Yeah? Just the man I want to see.
I'll browse around upstairs.
On them second floor lintels between the lally columns. You want we should rabbit them or not?
The second floor lallies?
Second floor lintels between the lallies.
All the lintels between the lallies.
Yeah, from the blueprints you can't tell. You want they should be rabbited?
No, I guess not.
Okay, you're the doctor. Hey, fellas! You got any of them rabbited lintels set? Rip them out!
It sounded less expensive to say no.
Woo! Sorry, I think that was too funny. That has nothing to do with my talk. I just wanted to show this to you. Hollywood does a good job of capturing our troubles, our the headaches. They do a good job of catching glimpses of our lives, especially in the home. In this 1948 movie, I mean, that is such a classic colonial revival mantle. This kitchen, they don't show much of that kitchen in the movie, but these are some stills, and just that modern appliances, the Formica with the metal edge. I mean, they're really fun for me to look back at and see kind of how these things were built. This house, this movie was a great success. This was the house they built. They did 71 raffles around the country where they rebuilt this house and sold them all. What they did was, so this is 1948, middle of that colonial revival. Remember, they're just getting back from the war, and so the housing shortage is crazy. And so as a part of the promotion for the movie, they did that. There's him reading the original book. But it's a really great movie if you haven't seen it, and it captures that whole deal. And if you want to know where the money pit came from, that's where that came from. Now, the other thing that Hollywood does is it inspires us. And, historically, the Grand Tour was only for very wealthy people to go, traveling around Europe to see houses. But because of, Downton Abbey, we get to go to these places and we get to see these houses and we get to live like they lived and see what they did and see what their lifestyle was like. And we actually are inspired and encouraged to, build better, to understand what high style craftsmanship was like, see what true wealth was. And for me, get inspired. Like I'll look at a linenfold panel or a carving in a spandrel or how they did this opening on this English revival style. And I learn, right? And I get better as a builder because I can go and I can travel. Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite movies. It's kind of a girl movie, but it's really a great movie. Especially for the architecture. This is Mr. Darcy's house, the front and back of it, the Chatsworth House. You can actually go visit many of these houses. This scene here with the Temple of Apollo, but they would set up in the Georgian period their landscapes. And so on very wealthy houses, you would have these vistas and views that would open up to, these spots, right, that you would see these things. So they had traveled to Europe, they had seen these ruins, they had seen these the Italian villas and things like that, and they came back and they recreated them in their English countryside houses. But the drama of that piece there and the architecture, which is just stunning, becomes part of the character of the movie, becomes part of the story, and we understand these people better when we can see and understand their lives. Now, if Mr. Darcy is living in this house, they were living in this house. And has anybody seen this movie? Pride and Prejudice. It's a fantastic movie if you just want to Google or oogle at the architecture. This is a Sir Christopher Wren house. Okay, he was the architect who did St. Paul's Cathedral in London. He was a very accomplished man in the early 1700s, but this is a fantastic house. And I remember in the early stages watching this movie and falling in love with this house. Now, her family, can't remember her name, Bennett, thank you. Alice, you want to get up here and teach? Yeah. The Bennetts, they don't have money, right? And so compared to the Darcys and things like that, in fact, they don't own this house. But I just loved this house. And then to find out it was built by designed by Christopher Wren, it just adds this oomph. And, kind of geek out of this movie, this house, they didn't have much money, but as they showed the house and they showed them living in this house, you understood that there was a real depth to their character. You understood that they had, he was a reader and he was a thinker and he was he had these admirable qualities, and by just studying the architecture, you knew a lot about him. Where there was very wealthy houses and there was no depth of character, and they contrasted that with the architecture. What you're seeing is that architecture communicates character and it communicates these ideals. And of course, architecture communicates character, right? Remember Dr. Evil? This was his space lab. This was his lair, right? And so we know because they show this goofy lair in his funny chair. Do you remember that scene where I should do it again, but no, I won't. Where he gets stuck in his chair and he's like, and he's like trying to get out of his chair, right? That is a whole character reveal, right? That we're seeing that he's a numbskull, right? And we're looking at his architecture and we're realizing that he is an idiot, right? A bumbling, evil doctor. But movies are a powerful medium. They transport us to these places, and it's clear from all the studying I was doing that they, part of the director's objective in showing, the evil lair of the bad guy is to reveal his character. So you don't have to necessarily have all this story and reveal. They just show the house, and you go, oh, okay, I get an idea of what this person's like. So again, architecture communicates character, and this is important for us as we think about our houses, because when we're building, when we're doing things, what are we communicating? Okay, any questions? We're having fun though, right? It was interesting to me that Hollywood really is maybe 100 years old now, because it really starts in the 1920s, okay? And the 20s and 30s, you don't have the talkies until the 27, 28. That's when the synchronized voice. Anybody Singing in the Rain? Yes, Singing in the Rain. Remember, they do that whole synchronized, the talkies, and she has that terrible voice, and she goes, what's wrong with my voice? Can you do the impression for me? No. Remember, she has that terrible accent. She's beautiful, but she has that terrible accent. And they're like, what are we going to do about her? Anyway, so this was I read about that. That actually really was a problem for some of these people. So the early Hollywood and talking and the synchronized voices was a big deal. Essentially, you have two periods of Hollywood. You have this golden era, which is from the 20s up into the 70s, 69, 70. And then you have the new Hollywood. And so Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, those guys are new Hollywood. They're Jaws, the Godfather, Apocalypse Now. And so there was the old Hollywood, the golden era Hollywood, where there's all these big studios, MGM, Paramount, all those big ones, and they controlled their stable of actors, and they paid them. I don't know if you guys, I'm going to reference a lot of movies. What's that? Three Amigos. Anybody see Three Amigos? Remember they go to Three Amigos and they go, they come back and they ask the boss for a raise, and he goes, you want a raise? And he goes, aren't you living in the house? Yes. Hey, throw the Three Amigos out of the house. Aren't those our clothes? Yeah, throw them. They really did control these actors, and they really did things. And in the 70s, late 60s, they actually had an antitrust lawsuit against them because these studios actually own the movie theaters as well. And so they would show all these different movies, but they were kind of junk. And it was just because they had a monopoly on the theater and they controlled the whole process. So new Hollywood comes along, and you have Spielberg and these guys who are artists. And you have, remember the United Artists was a brand of theaters. Those were actually independent artists working outside of the studio system. And Apocalypse Now apparently nearly broke United Artists because it was such an expensive film and it ran over. So anyway, two different eras of Hollywood is the point here, and stories change. Well, that's good. Want to watch Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Well, so we'll just watch it on my screen here. Okay, here we go. Television comes about in the late 40s and early 50s. It's part of the stranglehold that Hollywood started losing control because TV came along. First World Series, there's a presidential address in 47. Shows like the Today Show and the Tonight Show both start in 52, 53, very early. Becomes wider adopted in the 50s and 60s because of color television. And of course, CNN and cable TV starts in the 80s. But TV is an important part of widening out this whole era and how we view our TVs. So first we're going to talk about the backlots. Everybody know what the backlots are? Essentially, these theaters owned these studios owned a bunch of land. And so in the early days of Hollywood, they had 40 acres behind their thing, and they would go, they called them the backlots, but they would, build a Western town, or they would build, a cityscape. For whatever movie they were trying to do, Sing in the Rain, for instance, was in one of these backlots. They were all kind of manufactured to, they needed a backdrop, a physical backdrop that they could work against. This lasts until about the 70s when people start looking at it going, it's kind of fake. And so then they start going on location. So they stopped doing movies, especially in these backlots, but they're connected to the studios. Leave It to Beaver, the Munsters, are going to show you some of that and how they were used. Some of the most famous shows that we grew up with, I'm a little bit older than a lot of you, so I Dream of Jeannie. The Waltons, interesting, was on a backlot. If you know that, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation was on the backlot, Leave It to Beaver. Anyway, they're all over the place, and in fact, if you want to do a deep dive into any of this, just type in backlots Hollywood and you will, there's a lot of information out there. This is the one at Universal City. This was a street, okay, that these houses are on. And Leave It to Beaver House is Cleaver House right here, which is that house. And then around the corner, the Munsters house is here, right? And so the couple of Victorians. And what they have is they have, and they're all just three-sided houses, right? And so there's no back on the things, oftentimes not a roof. You can kind of see the tarp up on this thing right here, that it's not a real place. But they would set up their cameras so that if beavers walking the street, right, and coming home, you see it kind of as this idyllic little neighborhood, but it wasn't. It was all fakery. This is Leave It to Beaver. There's Beaver there in front of that Victorian house, and then that became the Munsters house a few years later. So the same house, they grew a bunch more stuff, they broke some windows, and it becomes the Munsters house. Anybody watch the Munsters? Architecturally, okay, these things aren't the best. They're like this, I don't even know what that style is. It's kind of Second Empire. There's some Gothic things going on there. And as we look at these houses, it's interesting that they're really kind of bad. But I never noticed it until I started studying them, started looking at them, and kind of trying to figure out, what the story was behind them. A lot of advertisements were done in the backlots because they do provide a great backdrop for these cars. And you'll notice this one's kind of in a western town, and then this one's by a big city gate. And anyway, they have all different types of things that were done on the backlots. And then Desperate Housewives was probably the last show. I never watched Desperate Housewives, but I did find there's all this stuff. What style do you think that house is? This is all Wisteria Lane. There was 8 seasons, so someone watched. Did anybody watch it in here? Okay, yeah, someone. What style house is that? No. Little bit. It's a Dutch colonial. It's okay that you didn't get that, okay? Because it's not a good one. You can see that there's a gambrel roof right here. So that probably makes it Dutch colonial, but this kind of thing is like a ranch detail, and I like this addition. I mean, I don't even know what that is. And so they are funky houses, but I never noticed that until I think, what style is that? It's yes, all the above. It's a Victorian house. It's not a good one, but it is a Victorian house. You got the fishtail shingles up here. You got a little bit of the Victorian columns here, but that's about it. Maybe the brackets. It's not great. I do find that interesting, though. What style is that? That one is Colonial Revival. I think that's like a 50s Colonial Revival. What style is that? Yes. No, it's weird. Like, that's like a door from the 1920s. Those windows are way too far apart. They've never been done that way. That's a weird window. It's just kind of this weird collection of different architectural details. And then you really start realizing these houses really are a backdrop. They really are just kind of pretty things to look in the background to kind of check out, which is really interesting to me. The point being is you don't need to have perfection in order to communicate good design. So when we're building houses and working on houses, right, we don't have to hit everything perfect, but you do have to get a lot of it right and in order to communicate really clear design. Remember, these houses, you are basically, they're pass-bys. You see them for like 5 seconds. And so there are things that we're going to have to do better. What message are you trying to communicate, right? What story? I oftentimes ask our clients, what's your narrative? What's the story? What are we trying to do here so that we can start building better houses? Because if you don't have a story, you end up with this, okay? That is nothing. That is not a style. It's not anything. There are mixes of different pieces in here, like there's a divided light window, or there is this, kind of the old-timey garage door. But that isn't a style, and I want us to get better at communicating clearly. And then, of course, houses look better in context. I've talked to people about, in these cookie-cutter rows doing something really great, and it's just a waste of time because the context of it, you're not going to expect to or want to see something really done well in those neighborhoods where the design's bad and the craftsmanship's bad, and it's a waste. So you need to stay in context. Okay, so here's a bunch of quizzes on houses and shows. What show is this?
Full House.
Full House. You knew. Okay, it's Full House. Ding, ding, ding. They get one right. What style is that?
Victorian.
Yes. That's not the full answer. What style of Victorian? San Francisco Victorian? No. I mean, yes, but that's not the right answer. It can be Queen Anne, it could be Italianate, it could be Second Empire, it could be, it's one of those three. Bobby? Chris? Oh my gosh. Those guys work for me, they don't know the answer to this. This no, it's Italianate, okay? And you Italianate because you've got arches in the windows a lot of times, but these brackets are really the thing that determine it being Italianate. Now look, it's not great, beautiful Italianate, but this is a whole row of Italianate Victorian houses, and yes, that's Full House.
Is that a real house?
It's a real house. A real house, you can go visit. But I'm glad you asked that because this is the inside. Which one's the real house? Yes. So this is the left. You see that door that you saw right there. And then, of course, the window next to it, right? This, that ain't even close to what's on the inside of that house because they walk in that front door. So there's a little bit of, most of the time in Hollywood, they are showing the outside of the house and then the inside's a set. And so they never going into the inside of the house and the real thing. So yes, real thing, not the real thing. Now, originally, this would never have been open like that. This would have been a parlor that came across. You would have gone through probably some sliding doors that went into that parlor, but never would have been like that. What movie is this? What style house is that? It's a Dutch colonial. When was it built?
27.
Wow, really good. Yes, this is a 1920s period revival Dutch colonial.
Reflective of our interests. We love horror.
They really, you guys nailed that one. This is the front side of it, right? Very handsome house. There's actually some really good details as I was looking at this. Like all this lattice work in there, that's really pretty. The balustrades on both sides are really well done. This is a great house. But
They've since changed those quarter round windows. They look like eyes.
is that, did they?
Now if you look at them,
Oh yeah, look at that. You know a lot about Amityville Horror.
there was a show on it.
Oh, it was? Okay. All right. What show or movie is this?
New Girl.
New Girl. Alice. Did anybody know this is New Girl? Anybody watch New Girl?
I recognize it.
Okay, when was this built? Do you saw it? What? It's 20s or 30s. We actually have things very similar to this on Lancaster. Houses, they're concrete with brick infill, steel windows. They're built in the 1920s, 1930s. And this would be the industrial size. What's that?
It was always an apartment, right?
Oh, I doubt it. I bet it was industrial. But they've been turned into apartments. But here again, we're communicating what the character of these people, like they're single, right? They're not married. They're, right out of college. It's kind of that hip, cool life, Of course, none of them, they're all single. They're all kind of hanging out together, kind of finding their way in life. So that's here's a building communicating who these guys are. What movie is this?
Ferris Bueller.
Ferris Bueller. Who said that? Nice. We're dealing with Ferris and then his buddy Cameron. Which house did Ferris live in? This one. And remember, Cameron lived in this house. Remember, he was asleep and that music was playing in the background. Thank you. When was this built? Wow, that's too much. 19. Yeah, what style is this? Yeah, it's period revival. It's in that whole area. It's that colonial style. There's actually Greek columns that go down. There's no bases on those, which is kind of interesting because it's not really a Greek entry. What style is this?
Mid-century modern.
Correct. Built in the 50s and the 60s, right? So the interesting thing here is, and this is, we'll start to see this a little bit more with the villains, is that you have these two people pitted against each other, Ferris versus Cameron. And Ferris is obviously this lighthearted, very grounded person. Cameron's this very troubled, person who doesn't know who he is and how he fits in. And he's, almost a villain figure. He's not. He's kind of too harmless to do that. But here you start to see the director, right, playing with architectural styles to tell a story about who these people are. So I find that very interesting. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This one was too easy. I was going to try to have you guess, but that's Brady Bunch. When was this house built?
59.
What's that? Yeah, that's just a little bit later, I think. It's like 64 or something like that. It's really close, but it is mid-century. You obviously know this. And it's modern. This too, I'm just telling you how much information there is on. There's one called Hooked on Houses, the website, that has the story behind every house. There's people on YouTube that they break down these houses and actually do AutoCAD, 3D tours. You can go through the house based on what the house was or based on all the movies. And they're like, well, this room must have been this way. I mean, I'm talking deep dives into this stuff if you care and want to do that stuff.
That was the Brady Bunch house. There was a show where the Brady Bunch kids got together, and that house, of course, was just a house, and the set didn't look anything like it. Well, they
Right.
made the house look like the set. They went in, they got sourced Formica and everything for the house.
I mean, I actually think that's fun. And when I find these houses that are original, that still have Formica and the avocado stuff and colors, I think it's fun. So there is a way to play with that, I think, when we're working on houses, especially mid-century stuff, putting in Formica, putting in these materials that can communicate that era. I think some of that is done, it can be really fun. What house is this? What? Christmas Story, that's correct. What period is this house?
1920,
No, a little bit earlier.
1910.
It's about 1890, 1900, okay? They call this a colonial house. I don't think it's a colonial. I would say it's a vernacular kind of Victorian. It's in Chicago, but it's a very simple house. Here too, you're talking about a working class house. By the way, that porch is not right. That was not done in any kind of period. There's no entablature to holding that up. Those columns run up right up to the ceiling. So that's wrong. But it does communicate, this kind of working class kind of individual, which of course what is. But yes, Christmas Story, correct. What movie is this?
Meet Me in St. Louis?
No? Alice, you can answer.
I don't know.
No? Bill Murray. Groundhog Day. Do you remember this? This is one of my favorite movies of all time. So the Victorian houses are, yes, so it's Groundhog Day, Bill Murray. Victorian houses are kind of, they can go both ways, right? They can be the scary, haunted house. They can be something that grounds the individual. The fact that Bill Murray, in his transformation, goes from hating this town, hating everything about it, to I want to live here, right? Shows his transformation and character change, that he would appreciate, simplicity, traditional values, things that he was against. And so we're really seeing the transformation, and him falling in love with this house ultimately is kind of the character transformation that happens in this movie. You see what I'm doing here? You see how the character and the house and the stuff all matter and how it all comes together?
He was right to not love that house in the first place.
What style is this house?
Victorian.
Victorian. Queen Anne, that's correct. How do you know? The turret, that's correct. Queen Anne is a bunch of different styles, a bunch of different things going on, but the turret is pretty much the giveaway that you're dealing with Queen Anne. What movie is this?
Focus, focus.
Yes. Who called that one? This was one of the few movies that actually, kind of comedy, fun movies, that actually had a Georgian historical house. This is in Salem. This is I guess I can show this. This is in Salem. Anybody been to Salem? You get a gold star. Salem's if you want to see great federal architecture, Salem is the town you need to go to. This is actually a house built in the 1760s, would make it Georgian, but this kind of posts on the outside are all federal, so it's a kind of a mix of things going on. This was a little, what style is that house?
French.
Well, it is French, but it's Victorian. What style in Victorian?
French.
Second Empire. No, Second Empire is France, right? That's the Second Empire of them. So, but yes, that is a French mansard, the mansard roof, based on the French architect Mansard. So, great architecture in this movie. Hocus Pocus, had to show the federal Georgian house. What show is this? Breaking Bad. Okay. What style is this? No, this is the depressing style. Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, right? Two movies, both in Albuquerque. Better Call Saul just finished in this, so there's been a bunch of articles I've been reading about that show. And the setups they did, and the framing they did, and how hard they fought for the right architecture with these houses, and the cars that they drove, and the things that, remember in Better Call Saul, he ends up living in that McMansion, and just this cheesy, terrible McMansion, which again communicates that he's just cheesy, terrible guy, and so. But there's no better character reveal and character thing than this. And of course, this is Better Call Saul. And, is that the fact that they are highlighting a strip mall, right? Is there anything worse architecturally in America than the strip mall, right? And so, anyway, character, bad character, Better Call Saul. Okay, you guys did pretty good. Good job. Now I want to talk about any questions about any of that? Okay, so the villain's lair and modern design. It's very clear that, hey, will you go grab that article on my desk? it's very clear that traditional houses, okay, are good, are the white knight, and modern houses are the evil knight or whatever. It used to be in the 20s that you'd have Count Dracula in the dark castle, you know, the dastardly cape, the mustache, and all that stuff. But when North by Northwest came around and Hitchcock came along, let me grab that one. Thank you. He basically changed the way people think about modern design and a modern house and the bad guy. So what happens is, what Hitchcock does in North by Northwest is that he basically takes the villain not just being this, you know, evil guy who lives in a bad castle, but changes his character and gives him a very debonair, okay, very sophisticated, very intelligent kind of skin. And so he uses this house to communicate that this guy is, you know, the words that are used expressing visual dominance, disaffected intelligence, cold-blooded, are all communicated by this house. What they wanted was, they wanted a Frank Lloyd Wright house, and this is supposed to be like their Falling Water, okay? One of the stories is they talked to Frank Lloyd Wright, but it was too expensive for him to build something. So they ended up, this is just a painting. There is no house like this, and people talk about deep dives on the internet. This house, the Van Damme house, is a house that people chase after and go. But to make my point on the architecture, there's this, I'll put it in the description, there's this article just this month in Vanity Fair magazine on architecture, and the title is How One Modernist Building in North by Northwest Changed Cinema Forever. So they're talking about the minimalist buildings. They talk about the vampires in Twilight. They talk about the layers in James Bond movies, and saying, yet the screen sensation generated by these enigmatic houses is cold, unyielding, a physical manifestation of the inhabitants' wicked psyche. I'm doing this as a segue to November's Buildings and Brew when we talk about modernism, because this is the hint on, you know, modern design and how modern design changes. And when we talk about Art Deco, when we talk about these different things, we're certainly going to be talking about Frank Lloyd Wright, but there is a personality communicating in these things that is, why is it that all the bad guys always have a modern house? Like, what does that say about modern design and what we really think about it? So I find that fascinating. Modernism does not appear as a villain's lair until Hitchcock brought it back North by Northwest, using cultivated gentility to cover malign intentions required an equally sophisticated architectural expression, right? So they're talking about how this person, this bad guy, needs this building to communicate this debonair sophistication that allows him to be a villain. The best way to make a thriller work was to keep your villain suave and clever. That kind of wouldn't dirty their hands with an ordinary gun. And then one last quote. He makes the point that this guy would not have been near as evil, okay, if he had been in a rustic cabin, right? It just wouldn't have worked, right? It is just like, who is this guy? He needed to be in this kind of lair in order to communicate this evil intention. And you think about the James Bond movies, and the guy in the space, they have the guy in the water things, and the Dr. No, and then this Quantum of Solace. This isn't even a hotel. This was it's in the desert. It's an observatory. You can't even stay here, but they have all these scientists come in. But how cold and unyielding is that, right? I mean, just what kind of person designs and lives in that kind of thing? It doesn't. It's not a soft-hearted person who likes kittens, right? It is a twisted mind in many ways. And then, what does it say about modernism? This is the house from the vampire movie.
Oh,
Twilight, thank you. And that they lived in this house, right? And that communicates that they're aloof, that they're different, that they are disengaged. And so there is this character that happens with these houses and that's communicated that is fun and interesting. Any questions on any of that? Isn't this fun?
How about Dexter? Would he be in that house?
Yeah, they talked about Dexter's house. I didn't dive into that one. But yes, didn't he live in a motel?
The Ridgely house, the Ridgely North house that just went up recently. You know,
Which one?
that modern house that went, I'm sorry if that owns here. In Ridgely North, you have all this, such a mix, but I don't know the street, but right on the corner there, that huge modern house just went up. Very English. Very
Well, I think there's a reason modern houses are by, 5% of the houses being built. And, when realtors and other people are talking about, someone wants to build modern, they're like, you might have a tough time reselling that because people just don't, gravitate to that style. And this kind of study and this kind of understanding of modernism makes you go, maybe that's why all these houses aren't modern. Now, I would have said before studying this, I like some modern stuff. I like things. It's not necessarily, I'm not sure I'd build one, but I can appreciate and look at them and go, yeah, I kind of like that house, right? It's different, it's cool, it's simple, right? And that minimalism is really popular right now. So,
Let's just make me think about who lives there.
yeah, the serial killer.
What
So,
kind of person lives there? What kind of family lives there now? It's interesting. You're taking it, it's like going deep.
yes, it's a worthwhile question. If you own a modern house, then be careful. Okay, so the point of all this is that this was meant to be a fun kind of looking at our houses and studying house styles, but houses do have a character. Okay, houses do have a story, and there is a way that we can infuse life into them. Sometimes it's done well, sometimes it's done poorly. I believe today we don't do it as well as we did pre-1940. I think those Tudor houses of the 1930s are much better done than Tudor houses today. Why is that? Well, it's the little parts and pieces. It's the scale, for one thing. The traditional English cottage is not a 10,000 square foot house. And so when you try to create this cottage style house in this mansion, it doesn't work. And so many of you will sometimes be driving around going, I don't like that house. I'm not sure why I don't like it, but it's just, right? If you dial down into a lot of these details, the execution of them is a large part, and this is what I preach to my guys. We can have all the great ideas in the world, but it's execution. It's actually finishing and completing, a timbered opening in the proper way, that the timbers are the proper size, that the pegging is the proper size, that the hand-hewn details are the proper way. So it's all those little things that matter and, make things better. And that's the execution piece. And then, I really believe this, that if we want to live beautifully, we got to build beautifully. The architects of old used to always say, if you want honest citizens, build honest buildings. If you want, citizens that have strong character, let your buildings have strong character. And so the houses we're building today, unfortunately, are, disposable. And so when you have houses that are disposable, they're built very cheaply and very quickly in order to get people in as the cheapest bottom dollar. They're oftentimes not crafted very well. They're oftentimes not beautiful. And when something's not beautiful, people don't take care of it. And so those things start to fall apart and go away. So what I see when I study this whole thing is looking at it going, really these details really do matter. And there is, every director in Hollywood knows that character matters and that they need to find these houses that communicate that. So we need to be building better. Next time, November 10th, Art Deco, the rise of modernism. We're just going to talk about modern design. And then The next one after the new year is going to be about houses today and what we can do to fix them. So we got to talk about modernism. We got to talk about what that is, how it works today, why they built that house in the Twilight video, the Twilight picture, you know, where that came from. We're going to talk about all that, Art Deco, Rise Modern, next time. Thank you for coming.